I know the man who is watching this. He is not a man who lacks knowledge. He has read. He has listened. He has at various points in his life felt the stirring of something large inside him, a conviction that greater things were possible, a brief electrical certainty that if he simply applied what he understood, the results would follow. He has felt that certainty on a Sunday evening or after reading something that reached him at exactly the right moment or in the quiet of an hour when the noise of daily life had dropped away and his mind was briefly unexpectedly clear. And then Monday came and the certainty faded. And he did what he had always done, drifted back into the day's demands, the small urgencies, the comfortable, familiar routine. And by Wednesday, the conviction had dissolved completely, leaving only the faint impression that he had once felt something important without being able to say precisely what it was or why it had gone. This is not a man who lacks desire. It is a man who has never learned the difference between knowing a law and applying it. I'm going to give you a practice, 7 mornings. One specific act performed each morning before you speak to another person, before you look at the world's noise, before the day has carved a single groove in your attention. You will tell no one that you are doing it. You will announce no intention. You will report no progress to any man. At the end of 7 days, the results will speak for themselves, and they will speak with a voice loud enough that announcement will be entirely unnecessary. But first, I must show you exactly why this works, and why, without understanding the mechanism, most men abandon the practice the moment it becomes inconvenient, which is always on the 3rd morning. Part 1. Why the morning is the battlefield, the law of the first impression, and why most men surrender before breakfast. There is a moment in the first waking seconds of the day when a thing happens to the human mind that almost no man ever thinks to use in his own favor. Real quick, I want to step out of the lesson and just talk to you. We hit 300,000 subscribers, and honestly, I'm a little lost for words. Every one of those is a person who let me be a small part of their day, their journey, their hope for something more. That's sacred to me, and if you're one of them, I want you to really hear this. You are exactly where you need to be, among people who believe in the same beautiful possibility you do. You're not behind. You're not too late. You're right on time. Thank you for being here. It means the world. By the way, if you still have not checked the first link in the description, I highly encourage you to do so. You can get an auto-suggestion sheet for completely free, so go and grab it now. I want you to picture something before I name the law behind it. Picture a field of deep, undisturbed snow, unmarked, unbroken, stretching in every direction without a single track upon it. There is a quality of perfect receptivity in such a field. Anything that moves across it leaves a precise, lasting impression. And the first track to cross it determines more powerfully than any that follows the direction a man will tend to walk when he crosses that same ground the next time because the groove is already there. And the mind, like a man crossing a familiar field, prefers the path already worn. The mind of a man in the first waking moments of the morning is that field of snow. It has not yet been written upon by the day's interruptions, its petty discouragements, its accumulated noise. The groove of the previous day's drift has not yet reasserted itself. There is, for a few minutes, at the very beginning of waking consciousness, a condition of extraordinary receptivity, a moment in which what a man deliberately places in his own mind carries an influence out of all proportion to what it would carry if placed there at any other hour. Most men surrender this moment without a fight. They reach within seconds of waking for noise from outside, the opinions of other men, the distractions of the immediate world, whatever stimulus happens to be nearest at hand. And in doing so, they surrender the most powerful moment of their entire day to forces that have no particular interest in their success. They do not notice that they are doing this. That is precisely what makes the habit so dangerous. A man cannot defend against a theft. He is not recognized as a theft. What follows from that surrender is predictable because I have watched it in the lives of thousands of men. The man who has given his first waking moment to drift does not merely lose that moment. He establishes the tone of the entire day. The groove he follows in the first 5 minutes of consciousness is the groove his mind will tend to follow for every hour that comes after, because habit works in exactly this manner and not in any other. Let me describe this law to you as precisely as it can be described. A habit is a mental path. Your thoughts and actions have traveled that path so many times that it has worn itself into the nature of the mind, and the mind returns to it without being summoned, without your consent, and often without your awareness. A piece of paper, once folded along a particular crease, will fold along that same crease the next time, and the time after that, the resistance to a new fold growing with every repetition of the old one. A river running long enough over stone does not merely pass over it, it carves a channel through it, and thereafter flows in no other direction. Your mind is that paper. Your mind is that river. Every morning you allow drift to be the first impression of the day. You deepen the channel of drift and make every other path harder to reach. Here is the evidence of this law as I have observed it. Track down any man who has spent years of mornings drifting into his day without deliberate direction, and you will find, without exception, that his afternoon resembles his morning, and his week resembles his day, and his year resembles his week. Not because he lacks ability, not because fortune has been uniformly unkind, but because the groove of drift has been worn so deep that every one of his waking hours follows the same track without his knowledge or his consent. Now I will tell you the other face of this same law, because it is everything. The path can be changed. A new mental groove can be carved. It cannot be carved by a wish. It cannot be carved by a single dramatic resolution, however sincerely made. It is carved the same way every path is carved, by traveling at first with great deliberate effort, because the old path is so much more worn and so much easier to reach. Then with less effort as the new groove deepens. Then with no effort at all, because the new path has become the deepest one, and the mind follows it as naturally as water follows a channel. And here is the rule for path building that I have given to every man who has asked me how to apply it. At the beginning of the formation of a new habit, put force and enthusiasm into your expression. Feel what you think. The path is hardest at first, and it is hardest at first that you must be most deliberate. Travel your new path as often as possible. Resist the temptation to return to the old one. Every time you resist, you grow stronger. Every time you yield, you make the resistance harder the next time. The fight is at the start. Win it at the start, and the rest follows by the operation of the same law that has made the old path seem inescapable. 7 consecutive mornings is the minimum to begin carving the new groove deep enough to feel. Not 7 scattered mornings, not 7 mornings with a single exception between them. 7 mornings in unbroken succession, because every morning you omit, you send the needle back to the old groove and allow it to deepen at the expense of the new one. And the count must begin again from the beginning. There is a man I will describe to you. I will not give his name, for it does not matter. He was a man of genuine intelligence who had been studying the principles of self-development for several years at the time I encountered him. He could speak with considerable authority about autosuggestion, about the law of habit, about the mechanism by which thought becomes reality. He had filled notebooks with his observations. He had underlined and annotated more than a dozen volumes on the subject. Ask him to explain the principles, and he would do so with perfect clarity. But he had never spent 7 consecutive mornings applying them before the world began. He told me that the principles were sound, but that they had not worked for him. I asked him to describe precisely how he had applied them. He told me he had read the material frequently, that he had thought about the ideas a great deal, that on several occasions he had made resolutions about changing his morning routine, and had carried them out for a day or two before other demands had intervened. I told him that what he had described was not the application of the die principles. It was the study of them. And there is as much difference between studying a law and applying it as there is between reading a book on the art of swimming and entering the water. He had been for years standing at the edge of the pool. This practice will require you to enter the water every morning for 7 mornings without exception. What the practice consists of and why it works precisely as it does is what I will now explain. Part 2, the instrument and how it works, autosuggestion. the law that every great man has used and almost no one understands. Some years before I began the formal research that has occupied the greater part of my life, I came to know a man who had spent his working years in a position considerably beneath what his intelligence warranted. He was not a man without ambition. He was a man in whom ambition had been quietly extinguished by a mechanism he had never identified and therefore had never thought to dismantle. The mechanism was this. From the moment he woke each morning until the moment he fell asleep each night, the dominating impressions entering his mind were impressions of his own inadequacy. He did not manufacture these deliberately. They arrived from every direction at once, from the settled opinions of his associates, from years of modest expectations fulfilled at exactly the modest level he had expected them, from the voice in his own head that had formed the habit of greeting every new challenge as confirmation that he was not quite equal to it. He was not aware that these impressions were instruction. He did not know that his subconscious mind was receiving them as orders with the same faithful reliability that it would have received any other instruction delivered with sufficient repetition and feeling. He had been directing his own subconscious mind toward the production of inadequacy for years. Not deliberately, not by any conscious choice, but continuously and without interruption. And his subconscious mind, which does not examine the wisdom of its instructions and does not inquire into whether the man delivering them intends their consequences, had obliged him with perfect precision. Then he was given a formula, not an argument, not an explanation of theory. A formula, 5 specific statements to be written in his own hand, memorized, and spoken aloud to himself in a private place once every morning before the day had begun. He was instructed to speak these statements with all the feeling he could bring to bear, not as a man reading from a ledger, but as a man stating what he already knows to be true of himself. He thought it peculiar. He was a practical man, and speaking to himself in the morning before sunrise was not what he had expected the answer to look like. But he had tried enough other remedies. He followed the instruction without complete understanding of why it would work. In the first week, he noticed nothing. In the second week, he noticed a change, not in his circumstances, but in the texture of his own thought. The voice that had previously treated every difficulty as evidence of his limitation had grown quieter, not silent, but quieter, as though it had lost some certainty. And in its place, slowly, a different voice had begun to speak, faint at first, as uncertain as a new path through unmarked ground, but unmistakably present. By the end of the third week, the change in his outward circumstances had begun. By the end of the third month, men who had previously paid him little attention had begun to seek him out. Before we go deeper, understand this. Napoleon Hill said, "No desire turns into money until it's repeatedly impressed on the subconscious mind." That repetition has a name, autosuggestion. I've taken the exact daily script the old masters used and put it on a single page for you, completely free. It's called the autosuggestion sheet. Grab it and follow along for the rest of this video. The link is waiting in the description. He did not understand at first what had produced the change. He had not altered his skills. He had not changed his position. He had only changed what his own mind was hearing every morning. The name of the law that was operating in this man's experience is autosuggestion. And I want to explain its mechanics to you with precision, because without understanding the mechanism, a man uses it carelessly, and careless use produces no result at all. The subconscious mind cannot be reached by direct command. A man cannot simply decide in the moment of deciding that he believes himself capable of a great thing and have that decision take immediate root in his subconscious as a permanent conviction. The subconscious is not moved by decisions. It is moved by impression. An impression requires 2 things working together, repetition and feeling. Here is the law as I know it stated as plainly as I can state it. Any thought that is delivered to the subconscious mind with sufficient emotional force and repeated with sufficient consistency is eventually accepted by the subconscious as instruction. Once accepted, it is taken as a permanent conviction, and that conviction is then translated into its physical equivalent through the actions, decisions, perceptions, and opportunities that the subconscious mind shapes in the man who carries it. The key word in that statement, the word most men pass over without stopping, and in doing so, defeat the entire practice before it has begun, is the word feeling. The subconscious mind does not respond to words. It responds to words that carry emotional force behind them. A man who reads his written statement aloud with the flat, dutiful voice of a man reading a list of figures produces nothing of consequence. The subconscious receives his words and does nothing with them because they carry no charge. But a man who reads that same statement with the conviction of a man who already knows the thing he is claiming to be true, who can hear his own voice speaking with authority, who can feel even faintly the emotional reality of what he is stating, that man is delivering something the subconscious can receive and act upon. I have repeated this point in more volumes and to more audiences than I can count because the failure to understand it is the single most common reason this practice is abandoned before it produces results. Plain, unemotional words do not influence the subconscious mind. They pass through it like water through open hands, present for a moment, gone without trace. The subconscious responds only to instruction that has been well emotionalized. And this is not a difficulty without a remedy. The feeling need not be genuine at first. It need only be deliberate. A man who puts the effort of will into supplying feeling behind his words, even when the feeling does not arise spontaneously, is doing exactly what is required. The subconscious, given emotionalized instruction consistently enough, will eventually return to the man the very belief he has been stating. And at that point, the feeling will be genuine because it will have been earned through repetition. Now, here is the instrument of the morning practice. There are 5 statements. Write them down tonight in your own hand. Have them beside you when you wake tomorrow. Read them aloud before you speak to another person, before you eat, before the world has had a single minute of your morning. The first, I know that I have the ability to achieve the object of my definite purpose in life. I commit myself to persistent and continuous action toward achieving my chosen goal, and I will turn that commitment into consistent daily effort. I understand that the dominant thoughts in my mind will eventually translate into actions and ultimately shape my reality. Therefore, I will spend 30 minutes each day clearly visualizing the person I intend to become, holding that image firmly until it becomes embedded in my subconscious as a guiding direction. I also believe that through the principle of autosuggestion, any desire that is consistently reinforced will eventually find a way to manifest in practical form. For this reason, I will dedicate 10 minutes each day to building self-confidence and strengthening my belief in myself. I have clearly defined my main purpose in life, and I will not stop until I develop the confidence and capability required to achieve it. I understand that no success or wealth can be sustained without honesty and fairness. Therefore, I will not engage in any transaction that does not benefit all parties involved. I will attract cooperation by first offering value to others. I will inspire people to work with me because I am willing to serve them first. I will eliminate hatred, envy, selfishness, and cynicism, and instead cultivate a positive and respectful mindset toward others, knowing that negative thinking cannot lead to lasting success. I will earn the trust of others by first believing in them and in myself. I will practice this principle every day for 7 consecutive mornings as a discipline to build a new pattern of thinking. I understand that autosuggestion is the tool, concentration is the guiding force, and habit is the pathway that the subconscious follows. A thought can only become reality when it is held in the mind with persistence and emotion until the subconscious accepts it as a directive. Throughout this process, I will stand behind my thoughts, nurture them, and drive them toward manifestation. Beyond that point, the thought will stand behind you and push you forward. And you will find, as the practice deepens, that the effort required grows less with every morning because the groove you are carving becomes the groove the mind wants to follow. Part 3. The reason for silence, why great men guard their plans, and what happens to the mind that announces before it acts. There was a man I knew, a man of genuine ideas and honest ambition, who had, throughout his adult life, developed a particular practice at the beginning of every new endeavor. Whenever he conceived a plan or set a new goal or resolved to change some aspect of his conduct, he would, within the first day or two, described the plan to everyone around him with considerable enthusiasm. He told his wife. He told his colleagues. He told the men he encountered in the ordinary course of his working week. He spoke about his intentions with real energy. And those who heard him consistently agreed that the plan sounded excellent and that they expected to see great things from him. And yet, almost without exception, the plans came to nothing. Not immediately, not in any dramatic way that could be identified and examined, but by degrees, and always before they were complete. The energy that had been available at the moment of conception seemed somehow to diminish before it could be translated into sustained action. The plans would slow, then pause, then be replaced by new ones, described with equal enthusiasm to the same audience, with the same result. He told me once, with genuine perplexity, that he could not account for the gap between the quality of his ideas and the quality of his results. He was not a man lacking in intelligence. He was not a man who lacked the desire to succeed. What he lacked, without knowing it, was the understanding of a simple and precise law. The energy available for the execution of a plan is diminished by every act of premature announcement. Here is why this is true, stated as plainly as I am able. When a man announces his plan before it has been executed, he does two things, both of them damaging. The first, he invites the opinions of people who have not attempted the thing, have no particular knowledge of it, and out of their own settled habits of thought, have a natural inclination to offer doubt dressed in the clothing of concern. These opinions do not need to be malicious to be deadly. A single raised eyebrow from a trusted associate, offered not cruelly but gently, can introduce into the man's conscious mind a particle of doubt that was not there before, and that particle, small as it is, interrupts the clean delivery of his intention to the subconscious. The subconscious, receiving now a mixed signal instead of a clear one, responds accordingly. The second damage is more subtle. When a man describes his plans with enthusiasm, he experiences, in the act of describing, a portion of the satisfaction he had associated with the act of achieving. The mind, which cannot always distinguish clearly between the thing described and the thing done, receives a degree of the reward before the work has been performed. Now, if you're ready to stop learning and start seeing evidence, I built something for you. It's called the 14-Day Money Magnet Protocol. 14 days, one simple ritual a day. And the goal is concrete. Attractive, first $100 out of nowhere. And here's my promise. If it doesn't happen, you get your money back. Because $100 isn't the point. It's the proof the law is working for you. Start it at the second link in the description. And this premature reward weakens the urgency that is the very engine of action. The burning desire, that keen pulsating force that will drive a man past every obstacle, is cooled by announcement because announcement provides a release that desire was designed to convert into sustained, directed effort. This is why I've consistently taught that a man of genuine decision acquires his facts and information quietly without disclosing his purpose. Keep your eyes and ears open and your mouth closed if you wish to build the habit of prompt decision and persistent action. Those who talk more than they act deprive themselves of opportunities in proportion to the talking. Those who act more than they talk accumulate results with a consistency that appears to those watching from outside to border on the miraculous. Tell the world what you intend to do, but first show it. Deeds are what count. Words spent prematurely on intentions are words stolen from the energy of execution. Now apply this principle to the 7-day practice you are undertaking. The man who announces on the first morning that he has begun a new daily practice invites within 24 hours the opinions of men who have not done it, do not intend to do it, and whose own settled patterns have given them every reason to be skeptical of any new morning discipline. Their skepticism arrives not as direct attack, but as quiet dampening, the casual remark, the half smile, the gentle suggestion that he has tried such things before. And that dampening, arriving before the new groove is deep enough to withstand it, can undo 3 mornings of careful work in a single conversation. There is also a more intimate reason for silence during these 7 days. When you speak your practice aloud to another man, a portion of your subconscious attention transfers from the object of your daily statement to the question of what that other man makes of it. You are no longer fully concentrated. You are now partially monitoring a reaction. And concentration, the absolute undivided focusing of mental energy upon a single aim, is the very mechanism by which the morning practice delivers its instruction to the subconscious with maximum force. Any split of attention weakens the force. Silence preserves it. Practice the 7 days entirely within your own counsel. Speak your formula to yourself in a private place with the full weight of your attention behind every word. Accept no opinions on the practice before it has produced its results. The results, when they arrive, will constitute a report that requires no additional commentary. And they will arrive as they always arrive in exact proportion to the consistency with which the instruction was delivered. This is not merely wise counsel from a philosophical standpoint. It is the operational requirement of the law itself. A seed planted in good soil and watered daily, but dug up every other day to show a neighbor, will not grow. Leave it in the ground, water it in private, and at the proper time it will produce fruit. Enough fruit to show the neighbor without any need for prior announcement. Part 4. What happens inside the mind on each of the 7 days? The mechanics of transformation day by day. I want to walk you through the 7 mornings with precision, not to give you a vague promise of transformation, but to show you exactly what the law is doing inside the mind at each stage, so that you will recognize what is happening when it happens, and will not make the single most common mistake, quitting on the 3rd morning because you cannot yet see the result. First, understand this. The subconscious mind does not rest when the body sleeps. The evidence for this is something every man has experienced without ever stopping to examine it. You retire with an unsolved difficulty, a question you have been turning over in your mind without arriving at an answer. You wake, and the answer is present, not because you reasoned to it in your sleep, but because your subconscious mind continued working through the night on the commission you gave it before you closed your eyes. Give it a command with sufficient clarity and feeling before you sleep, and it will work through the darkness on your behalf without requiring your conscious attention or effort. This is precisely why the formula spoken the night before, read aloud just before retiring, as well as upon arising, doubles the force of the morning's instruction. The subconscious receives its commission in the last moment of waking consciousness, works through the night, and meets the man at the first moment of the next waking consciousness with whatever it has prepared. The morning practice then reinforces and deepens the instruction, and the cycle continues, building on itself with each passing day. Now the days themselves. On the first morning, everything is unfamiliar. The words of the formula have not yet settled into the mind. The voice that speaks them sounds to the man's own ears as if it belongs to someone else, someone more certain, more capable, more established than the man who is still lying in bed in the pre-dawn quiet, wondering whether this is going to produce anything. The feeling behind the words, which is the essential ingredient of the practice, must be supplied almost entirely by an act of deliberate will, because it does not yet arise spontaneously. This is correct. This is expected. This is not a sign that the practice is failing. It is the condition of the first step onto unbroken ground. The instruction for the first morning is simple. Begin. Begin despite the unfamiliarity. Begin despite the voice that wonders whether it is worth the trouble. Begin because the only way to discover whether a path leads somewhere is to take the first step onto it, and you cannot take the second step without taking the first. On the second morning, the path is only slightly more familiar than it was the day before, but it is slightly more familiar, which is precisely the point. The mind returns to it a little more readily. The words are a fraction less foreign. The act of reaching for the formula, rather than for some outside distraction, is one morning's repetition toward becoming the habit of reaching for the formula. 1 grain of sand in the scale placed this morning will be followed by another tomorrow, and another the day after, and the scale will move, but not yet. Not by the second morning. Patience is the instruction for the second morning. The third morning is the critical one. I say this without reservation and with the full weight of 30 years of observing men who have tried and abandoned this practice. The third morning is where the majority of men stop. Here is why. By the third morning, the practice has produced no dramatic observable result. The man's circumstances are largely what they were when he began. The world has not reorganized itself in response to 3 mornings of a spoken formula. And the voices of doubt, which habit has made resident in his mind, speak with particular energy on the third morning because 3 days of a new practice have not yet been sufficient to weaken them. They offer him a rational assessment. You have been doing this for 3 days and nothing has changed. A man of good sense would recognize that the results are not arriving and would redirect his energy elsewhere. I now ask you to recall the story of a man who went west to dig for gold during the great gold rush of that era. He staked his claim, worked for weeks with pick and shovel, and eventually struck a vein of extraordinary richness. He obtained machinery, shipped it to the site, began to mine in earnest. The first load of ore was sent to the smelter, the richest find in Colorado, they were told. A few more loads would clear the debt, and then the real fortune would come. Then the vein disappeared. They drilled, they searched, they found nothing. After a period of increasingly desperate effort, they decided to quit. The machinery was sold for a fraction of its cost. The men returned home. A mining engineer, engaged by the man who purchased the claim for value, examined the site and made his calculations. The vein, he concluded, would be found exactly 3 feet from where the previous owners had stopped drilling. It was found exactly there. The man who had sold the machinery for a few $100s had walked away from one of the largest gold deposits in the region. Not for want of effort, not for want of intelligence, but for want of the knowledge that what appeared to be failure was in fact 3 feet short of triumph. On the third morning of this practice, you are in that man's position. You are 3 feet from the gold. The vein has not disappeared. The law has not failed. The subconscious has been receiving its instruction for 3 consecutive mornings. And it is working quietly, without fanfare, without producing visible evidence yet, exactly as the law requires it to work at this stage. The instruction for the third morning is therefore this: continue. Not because you feel the results, not because the doubt has quieted, but because you understand the law well enough to know that the doubt's timing is the most reliable indicator that the result is near. By the 4th and 5th mornings, a shift has begun. And I want to describe it precisely so that you recognize it. The shift is not external. It is not in the man's circumstances, which may be largely unchanged. It is in the texture of his own thought. The formula, which was foreign on the first morning, has begun to feel like his own. Not entirely, not without effort, but more so than it did. The voice that speaks the words has begun to claim them. And the 30 minutes of concentrated thought that follow the time spent picturing clearly and in detail the person he intends to become has begun to produce mental images with a sharpness and a sense of reality that it did not possess on the first morning. Everything I'm teaching you comes down to one promise. You can become rich, but only once your mind is wired to attract money instead of repel it. And the fastest way to start that rewiring costs you nothing. I've put the exact daily script that programs your mind for wealth onto one free page. Go to the description right now and grab it. That's your first real step out of broke thinking and into the mind that pulls money in. Links in the description. This is the law at work. The subconscious, having received the same instruction 5 times with emotional force, has begun to accept it as a commission and has started quietly to organize the man's perceptions in harmony with it. He does not yet know how this is happening. He only knows that his mind returns more readily to thoughts aligned with his definite aim and resists more naturally the old grooves of drift and inadequacy that once received it so easily. On the 6th and 7th mornings, the man who has not missed a single day wakes into something that was not available to him on the first morning. The evidence of his own consistency. He has kept a promise to himself without exception for 6 and then 7 consecutive days. This act, unremarkable in its individual moments, invisible to every other man, requiring no public stage and receiving no external applause, is the foundational act of self-confidence, not the grand gesture, not the single heroic decision made in a moment of inspired clarity. The quiet, daily, absolutely unremarkable act of doing what one said one would do on schedule without a single exception for 7 consecutive mornings, this is what builds the kind of self-confidence that the subconscious recognizes as authority. And a subconscious mind that recognizes the authority of the man who commands it is the most powerful instrument available to any human being on earth. There is one further illustration I want to offer you from my own observations, because it captures something the goldmine story alone does not. I was present some years ago at Darby's uncle's mill on a quiet afternoon. A small child, the daughter of a tenant farmer, came through the door and stood quietly near the entrance. The uncle, busy with his work, looked up and told her gruffly to state her business and go home. She said simply, "My mother needs 50 cents. He told her he would not give it. She did not move. He threatened her. She said, "Yes, sir," and did not move. He picked up a stave and advanced on her with a look that should have sent any child through the door and down the road at the fastest speed her legs could carry her. She stepped forward. She looked up into his eyes and she said, at the full volume of her voice, "My mommy's got to have that 50 cents. He stopped. He put down the stave. He reached into his pocket and placed the coin in her hand. That child is the practice you are undertaking. The world's resistance, the voice of doubt, the third morning, the absence of visible results, the raised eyebrow of the neighbor that is the uncle, and the practice does not require the uncle's approval or his cooperation. It requires only that you refuse for 7 consecutive mornings to step backward." Part 5. What the 8th morning reveals and the charge that does not end at 7 days applied faith. The 6th sense and the identity of the man who does not stop. On the 8th morning, something is different. Not the man's salary, not his position, not the particular circumstances of his life, which are still largely what they were 7 days ago. What is different is something more fundamental than any of these things, and something that all of these things will eventually come to reflect. What is different is the man's relationship to his own word. He told himself he would do a thing. He did it 7 times without exception, without announcement, without requiring the approval of any other person or the visible arrival of any reward. The subconscious mind has received not only the specific instruction embedded in the formula, it has received a deeper and more important instruction that this man follows through, that this man keeps the promises he makes to himself, that when this man's conscious mind gives his subconscious mind a commission, it will not be withdrawn at the first sign of inconvenience or the first morning when the result is not yet visible. This is what self-confidence is, reduced to its most essential and practical element, not the feeling of certainty that is often manufactured, and the subconscious knows the difference. Not the public display of assurance that is frequently a performance with no corresponding substance inside the performer. Self-confidence, in the sense that actually moves the subconscious to act in a man's behalf, is the accumulated evidence, private, internal, daily, that the man can be trusted by his own deeper mind to follow through on what he is committed to. Now, let me speak to you about faith, not in the abstract theological sense, but in the precise and practical sense in which I have always meant it when I have applied it to the science of success. Most men who approach a practice like this one wait to feel faith before they begin. They say, "When I believe more fully in the result, I will speak the formula with greater conviction. When I have more certainty that this will work, I will invest more feeling in the morning practice." They have the sequence precisely reversed. Faith is not the starting point. Faith is what the practice produces. Consider this with care. The subconscious mind, given the same instruction with emotional force and consistent repetition, eventually returns to the man the very belief he has been stating. The process resembles, in its mechanics, what happens when a man first comes into contact with any influence and initially resists it, then endures it, then accepts it, then embraces it. We first endure, then pity, then finally embrace. Any impulse of thought that is repeatedly passed to the subconscious mind is eventually accepted by it and acted upon. This is equally true of negative thoughts, which is what produces the phenomenon of men who drift steadily deeper into failure, and equally true of positive ones, which is what produces the phenomenon of men who, seemingly without explaining cause, begin to attract the circumstances that match their dominant mental pattern. The man who has completed 7 consecutive mornings of this practice has not arrived at a destination. He has arrived at the beginning of the road that leads to the state of mind I call applied faith, the condition in which a man acts upon his declared intention before the visible evidence of its fulfillment has appeared, because his subconscious has received the instruction so thoroughly and has returned it to him so consistently in the form of conviction that doubt no longer has sufficient purchase to stop him. There is something beyond this that I want to describe, because it is the most remarkable phenomenon I have encountered in 30 years of this work. And it becomes available to the man whose daily practice has established a sufficiently organized and concentrated mind. When a man has carried on this practice consistently enough, not merely for 7 days, but long enough that the morning formula has become the dominating impression of his mind, he begins to receive, through what I have called the sixth sense, impressions and ideas that do not arise from his ordinary process of reasoning. They arrive instead as what most men call hunches. Sudden, clear, precise instructions that appear in the mind fully formed, often at the moment of transition between sleep and waking, precisely the moment. You will recall when the morning practice takes place. These impressions are not supernatural. They are the natural result of a mind organized, clarified, and concentrated sufficiently to receive vibrations of thought that an ordinary scattered drifting mind cannot detect. The great inventors, the great leaders, the men who have built lasting enterprises from apparently nothing, the secret of their apparent genius lies not in some quality of intellect unavailable to other men, but in the discipline of daily concentrated thought that has cleared their minds of the noise of drift and made them, in the best sense, receivers capable of receiving. I know a man, and this is no illustration invented for the occasion, who spent several years in modest circumstances, steady in his work, but never ascending above a certain level of result that he had privately accepted as the ceiling of his capacity. He began on instruction a practice essentially identical to the one I have described to you here. 30 minutes of concentrated thought each morning. The formula spoken aloud with feeling, morning and evening without exception. A written statement of his definite aim, read and reread, until it had been transferred from paper to the cells of the subconscious itself. At the end of the first month, his results were largely unchanged. At the end of the second month, men who had previously paid him little attention began, without explanation, to seek him out. Opportunities that had not previously presented themselves began to appear not through lucky accident, but as the natural consequence of a mind whose dominant vibration had shifted and which was now attracting to itself the circumstances, the associations, and the events that harmonize with its dominant pattern. He had not changed his skills in those months. He had not changed his position. He had changed only the dominant impression his own mind was receiving every morning before the world had spoken a single word to him. And the law of attraction, which draws to a man the circumstances that match the vibration of his most deeply held thought, had done the rest. This is not mystery. It is mechanics. The mechanics of a law as real and as consistent as any other natural law, and as available to any man willing to apply it consistently for long enough to see it operate. Now, let me speak directly to the man who has watched this entire video and has already identified, somewhere within himself, the voice that is preparing to find a reason why he cannot begin tomorrow morning. That voice is not his own. It is the voice of years of morning drift, which has worn its grooves so deep that it now speaks with the authority of settled fact. It will offer him a reasonable, sensible-sounding excuse. The demands of the early day, the uncertainty about the right words, the suspicion that he has tried things like this before and they have not worked. Every one of these objections is the old groove speaking, not the truth speaking. And the answer to every one of them is the same. Begin tomorrow morning anyway. Tonight, before you sleep, write down your definite chief aim in the clearest and most specific language you possess. Write the 5 clauses of the formula. Place them where you will find them in the first moments of waking. Set aside 30 minutes of the morning before the household is fully awake, before the first obligation of the day has made its claim on you, in which you will go to a private place. Read the formula aloud with all the feeling you can bring to bear, and then spend the remaining time holding in your mind, with the full force of your concentrated attention, a clear and detailed picture of the man you intend to become. Do this tomorrow morning and on the morning after that. And on the 5 mornings that follow, without a single exception and without a single announcement to any other man. Tell no one what you are doing. Tell no one what you observe. When the 7th morning is complete, the results will have already begun their work, not announced by any fanfare, not visible in any dramatic overnight transformation, but present in the quality of your thought, in the authority of your own internal voice, in the first evidence of a new mental path that has been worn just deep enough to feel. And then on the 8th morning, do not stop. 7 days is not the destination. 7 days is the proof that the practice works, the proof that you can follow through, the proof that the law is what I have always said it is. Not a philosophy to be admired, but an instrument to be used morning after morning by the man who has decided without reservation and without retreat to take command of the only thing in this world that any man has ever had absolute control over, his own mind. That decision is the only one that matters. Every other result follows from it as surely and as inevitably as water follows a channel, as surely as the sun follows its course through the heaven, as surely as every cause, without exception and without a single exemption for any man who has ever lived on this earth, produces its effect. Begin tomorrow morning. Do not wait for a better morning. This one, the one coming in a few hours, is the one that will make or unmake the next 7 days of your life. And the next 7 days, if you do not omit a single morning, will make or unmake the next 7 months. And the next 7 months will settle, in large part, the question of who you are on the other side of them. The morning is the battlefield. Occupy it first and claim it for yourself before any other force in the world has had a single minute of your attention. 7 days. Tell no one. The results will speak for themselves. They always do. Let me make you an offer the old teachers never could. For the price of lunch, I'll walk you through 14 days of the exact autosuggestion ritual, a daily money decree, the identity work, all of it, to pull your first unexpected $100 into your life. And that 100 isn't the point. It's the proof these teachings actually work. If nothing shows up, you pay nothing. That's the 14-day money magnet protocol. Test this law on your own life. Go to the second link in the description.